Hi there, Morgan here. Today I wanted to talk to you guys about DDH. It stands for Developmental Dysplasia of the Hips. I was diagnosed with DDH when I was a baby. I think I was like 7 months old when I got diagnosed. I was in various harnesses. I was told I was going to need surgery. Well, my parents were told I was going to need surgery. I was in various harnesses up until about 2 years old, and it completely handled my hip dysplasia. So I didn't need surgery or any further bracing or treatment after about 2 years old. Because there's a family history of DDH, then any children that I have will automatically be tested for DDH because there does tend to be a genetic component to it. My son was diagnosed with DDH. Right in the hospital after he was born, they checked his hips, like within 24 hours of birth, they checked his hips and they said it seems like they're fine. But they said at 6 weeks you'll want to go and get an ultrasound just to be sure, because it does tend to run in families. So I was like, okay, fine, no problem. And then there's a bunch of doctor's visits right at the beginning. So at his 3-day-old visit, and then his 1-week-old visit, and 2-weeks-old visit, and all of that, I was like, can you check his hips again? And they were like, nope, they feel fine. They take the kid's hips and they just sort of rotate them. And generally, if they are dislocated, then there will be a click. So it'll be like ka-chunk instead of just a smooth back and forth. And they said, no, your son's seems to be smooth. It should be fine, but go for the ultrasound. So I was expecting the ultrasound to tell us that we were all in the clear. So my kid was like 6 weeks old, maybe almost 7 weeks old, and we go in and I get the ultrasound and he's diagnosed with hip dysplasia. And I was totally distraught because hip dysplasia can be a fairly mild thing with you do some bracing and it's totally handled. It can also be like a really there can be a lot of treatment involved in order to be able to correct it. There can be multiple surgeries. It can be a really difficult thing for a family to go through in order to get it fully resolved. I was pretty freaked out at the time that he was diagnosed, but I was like, okay, well, what's the next step, right? So there's this harness called a Pavlik Harness that holds the kid's legs at a 90-degree angle from their body, and then when you lay them down on their back, their legs sort of flop open at that angle, and it forces so the joint of the hip, there's this ball part, and then there's the joint part, and it forces the ball part to go up into the joint part, because until that happens in a baby or in a young child, then the joint part doesn't form. So you get this ball part and you get it to make contact. Sorry. You get the ball part, you get it to make contact, and then the hip joint will form. So developmental dysplasia of the hip is when it's like this. Or it's also sometimes called CDH, congenital dysplasia of the hips. Anyway, when I was growing up, we just called it dislocated hips. So it's got a bunch of different names. As far as I understand, it's all the same thing. Another reason why I wasn't expecting my son to be diagnosed with DDH is because it's way more common in females, actually. It's super common in firstborn females, and I was a firstborn female, especially if you have a family history of that sort of a thing. My sister did not have DDH, so it was just me. Now, because I had DDH and because my son was diagnosed with DDH, then if I have another child, that child has like a 33% chance of having DDH. So it's a pretty high percentage of occurrences when the mother and a sibling have also been diagnosed with DDH. So the Pavlik Harness, it's a bunch of straps and a bunch of Velcro, basically. So you put a onesie on the kid and hopefully some really long, comfortable socks, and the doctor helps you put this Pavlik harness on. And generally, I mean, different doctors give different treatment plans based on the severity. We were told we could have the kid out of it for 1 hour out of every 24 hours. So in that 1 hour, we would give him a bath and run the Pavlik harness through like the washer and dryer, because like those things get dirty when they are on babies, right? And especially like babies have blowouts sometimes, and like the Pavlik gets really gross. So some families have two. I sent mine off to a family that had just, when we were done with it, I sent it off to a family who had been diagnosed just recently, so that they could have a second one, so that while one was in the washing machine, they could have their kid remain in the harness. The first like 24 to 72 hours in the Pavlik for us was really difficult. So my kid is 6 or 7 weeks old. He doesn't understand what's going on. Suddenly his body is being held in this position that it's not the most comfortable. And he's got this harness on him, so, you know, it would, like his shoulders would get rubbed a little bit, because there was a spot where you'd have a Velcro strap. So we got him a bunch of onesies that had a collar. So the collar would actually protect his neck skin from the Pavlik harness. I highly suggest that if your baby gets diagnosed with DDH and you have to use a Pavlik, get them some collared shirts or collared onesies. It made a huge difference for us as far as like the skin getting raw there. When we first put him in the Pavlik harness, they gave me these like super long baby socks, and it was awesome. I used those socks every day with the Pavlik harness, because he had a strap that went around his ankle, you know, and the end of his foot. Anyway, the really long socks helped to protect his skin, because baby skin is really sensitive. And so you've got this harness that has a lot of Velcro, which is typically very scratchy, and you're putting it right up against your newborn. So whatever you can do to help make them more comfortable is nice. So the way that the Pavlik harness works, it's not advised to put pants on the baby, because it makes it very difficult to do diaper changes without removing the harness. So we just learned how to do diaper changes with the harness on. And what I would suggest is to get, there's these tube sock looking things, or like leg warmers, baby leg warmers. So what you could do is you put a onesie on the kid, put the Pavlik harness on with some socks underneath it, and then put leg warmers on them if you're concerned like about warmth and all of that. For me, I kept my kid inside a lot, and so it was very warm inside, so I didn't worry about his legs getting cold. And then when we went outside, he was in the infant car seat, and so I just put a bunch of blankets on him. So I didn't worry so much about pants, but you can also look on Etsy.com, and there are a couple designers that make clothes that are designed to go over the top of a Pavlik. So one of the things for us that was super hard was we were about 6 weeks into trying to figure out this breastfeeding thing. I'm a first-time mom, and I didn't really know what I was doing, and it was not easy. It was like really rough. It was one of the roughest things I've ever done. And so we were trying to figure out breastfeeding, and then he gets put in this harness where he's essentially uncomfortable all the time, and it just really complicated our breastfeeding journey. So one of the things that was suggested was to put him in a football hold. And you can look it up. I'll try and, I guess, drop a link to what a football hold is for breastfeeding. He wasn't old enough yet to be able to just prop him on my knee and have him breastfeed. So anyway, football hold was suggested as something that would be the most comfortable for both of us with him in this Pavlik harness. I had to buy a special pillow in order to be able to do the football hold comfortably on either side without having to like maneuver a whole bunch of like crazy pillow formations and worrying about, you know, when you got like a 6-week-old and they're all squirmy and tiny, you want to have like a really secure grasp on them at all times. So using a bunch of regular pillows from our bed was not really working for me. So I loved the My Breast Friend pillow. There's one though specifically that's designed for twins. And so it goes on both sides so that you could, okay, so it goes all the way around you so that you could have a baby on either side in the football hold and be nursing both of them at the same time. So it was great because I could put my kid on this side, nurse him, and then I could flip him around without moving any of my pillow, and then nurse him on this side, and he was super happy. I was super happy. I could also have him in front of me and sort of have his legs sort of angled this way or towards me a little bit, and not be worried that I was interfering with how the harness was working. So that was one thing that was super helpful for me. Another thing to know is just like early diagnosis is super key. So if you think your kid might have hip dysplasia, if they start walking and you notice like they seem a little lopsided or something like that, like just go and get an ultrasound. Like my kid was diagnosed at 7 weeks, and he now at 19 months, he's been fully cleared. He does have to have checkups, you know, for up until I think he's 5 years old, but the treatment to get him back to where he should have been was super simple and effective, and we didn't need any surgery. We didn't need any like very intense things. So if you think your kid might have DDH, please go in and get them either an x-ray or an ultrasound depending on their age, just to rule it out, because the earlier the diagnosis, the simpler the treatment plan is going to be, and it makes a massive amount of difference. Okay, so one thing that DDH really affected for us was our sleeping. My kid had been sleeping in a like a sidecar sort of a situation where we had a little like bassinet thing next to our bed, and he was sleeping there pretty well, and then he'd wake up and I'd nurse him and I'd put him back, and it was going great. And then when he got put in the Pavlik, he became really uncomfortable a lot of the time, at least for a bit. So he ended up sleeping on my chest from about 7 weeks old until about 14 weeks old. And I know that that doesn't work for a lot of families. I'm a very heavy sleeper. So once I fell asleep with him like that, it was fine. And I just propped myself up with pillows all around me so that I wasn't going to drop him, and he couldn't like fall into the pillows and get smushed. So you have to judge for you what you think is safe, you know, and keep your sleeping arrangements safe. That's what worked for us. So I didn't use the boppy for breastfeeding specifically, but I did use it in bed to sort of put under me and sort of put under his little butt in order to be able to keep him propped up on me for the entire night. So that was just one thing that I found we had to do in order for anyone to get any sleep during those weeks. If you're concerned about DDH, you have to make sure that if you get a baby carrier, that it is the correct kind and that it holds the baby's hips in the correct formation. So your baby's hips should look like an M, right? So like their pelvis is here, and the way that the support is, so here's their little butt, and their knees should be higher than their butt. So if your carrier lets their little legs dangle like this and just has a really like thin strip of fabric supporting their pelvis, that's not super healthy for hips. And so you should look for one, and you can look up diagrams if you look up hip healthy carriers, and I'll try and put a link to one of those too. I have another video of a carrier that I really like that as far as I know keeps the hips in that like safe position. Another thing to know is that things like baby bouncers and baby walkers can contribute to DDH, or, you know, if your kid had DDH and then was, you know, given the all clear, then if you then use a lot of those products that put your kids' legs in an unhealthy position for their hips, I wouldn't suggest it. Obviously, follow your doctor's orders. I'm not a doctor. I'm not even gonna pretend to give medical advice. I did use bouncers with my kid after he was cleared. I was told by our doctor that treated him that he would be fine with those. So I did use them, and I know that if he had had a relapse of his DDH, I would have felt horrible about it. So I don't know that I would suggest that to another mom in that same situation. But he did really love it. So he loved the bouncer. I wouldn't let him use it for very long at a given time, but I did have one of those and use it from time to time. So now my kid will have checkups. He had a checkup, I think, at 3 months, and then at 6 months, and then we did one at a year. And so far he's been good. So he'll get another checkup at 2 years old, and then I think we do them annually until he's 5, I believe. I hope that, you know, some of you moms out there, if your kid's been diagnosed with DDH, it sucks. And it can be really upsetting and very scary. And I hope that, you know, all of your treatment plans are just very simple and easy, and that it gets corrected very quickly. It can be a very simple thing to correct. You know, we only had to be in the harness for about 2 months, and then he was given the all clear, and it's continued to be all clear since then. So we were very fortunate. I'm very thankful about that. And that's the sort of, if you have to be diagnosed with DDH, I would hope that your treatment plan would be as smooth as ours was. So thank you for watching. I really enjoyed talking to you guys, and I'm excited that you guys are here hanging out with me. If you like this video, subscribe. I'm gonna do some like tips and tricks for a new mom and things like that. So I hope you'll stick around and check out my next video. Okay, thanks guys. Bye. Thanks guys for watching, and please subscribe and check out the links in my description.